Good afternoon. It's a real honor to be selected by the family to speak on behalf of Ezra's business partners. Gad, Shabet, Shuti, Keza, and Chantal, my family and I and all our business partners from all over the world send their condolences. And today we really mourn with you. For me, it's an extraordinary privilege to be asked to speak on behalf of Ezra's business partners. But I want to make my tribute a personal one. When my wife passed away in April this year, I called William Pike, and William, as ever, very considerate, said, should we come or should we give you a bit of time? That afternoon, I came downstairs to find a group of people in my living room. William had reached out to Kiprono, to Ezra, to Peter Kenneth, and they all said to him, you have lived in Africa all your life. We always thought you were African. When there is a death, we show up immediately. And Ezra was there, and he held my hands throughout. He was, for me, the most gracious man and one of the kindest men I've ever met. But my story with him starts in a different way. In the early 90s, I moved to Uganda from strong persuasion from William Pike. And I remember moving from here where there was water to Uganda, where it had just come out of the war, and water only flowed between 2 o'clock in the morning and 3 a.m. And my wife said to me, why have you brought us here? Be that as it may, William and I started discussing, and we decided to do a new business together. And it was to start up a radio station. And in those days, to think about starting a radio station in Africa was treason, because radio stations were what army people used to take over countries. So I asked William, let me put together a business plan. So I did. When the business plan was finished, I said, how much do you have in your savings account? So he took his savings and I took my savings. And when I looked at the business plan, the money was nowhere near what we needed. So I said to him, look, make me a list of people who we can do business with. So William comes up with the name of a couple of his political friends who he had been in the bush with. And then I said, what about businessmen? And he gave me, I think, 2 or 3 names. But on top of the list was a gentleman called Ezra Bunyenyezi. I had heard of him as a stylish businessman and a great thinker. So I went and polished up the business plan, but after I gave it to him, from where I come from, it's always a good thing when you are going to do business to find out a little bit about the man. So one of my business partners one day introduced me to a very charming, dashing young man called Dudu, who happened to be Chantal's brother. And he said, I hear you want to go and talk to my brother-in-law. And I said, yes, I think so. He said, what do you want to tell him? You know, I have to go and talk to him. So I said, look, don't go and say anything about me. So be that as it may, eventually the business plan got to him. And when I met him, he says to me, okay, I'll look at it, I'll call you. So I went away, kept waiting and waiting, and then one day I got a call in the office, And it's Ezra on the phone from Uganda Travel Bureau. And he said, Patrick, come to my office. So I get in my car and I start praying. And I pray all the way to the place. And when I get in, he says, come in, sit down. Gives me a cup of tea and says to me, tell me about yourself. So we start talking. He asked me questions about who I am. He tells me, oh, I know so-and-so in Ghana. So we talk and talk. And then I'm thinking, okay, is he on or is he out? So eventually he looks at me and he says to me, I want you to answer one question. I said, what is it, Mzee? He says, can I trust you? And I sit for like 3 minutes. And I said, of course you can trust me. And then he gets up, walks across the corner and says, here's a check. I've just received payment from the airlines. It's my whole check. Go and get started. And without Ezra, we absolutely could not have started Capital Radio in Uganda. He became our first chairman. He was our advisor to us. He encouraged us every time. When we said we were looking to come to Kenya, he said, you should. He encouraged us to expand way beyond what we could ever do. When we came to Kenya, there was a day he was in Kenya and he said, come along, let me take you to a few friends. So he takes me and introduces me to the former vice president, the Honorable Moody Awori. He says, this is my partner. And knowing him, he has stories for every day. So he tells a few stories and tells the Honorable Moody Awori, you know, he's West African, but you can trust him. And only Ezra can say that. And so he takes me along one day and says, I want you to meet another friend of mine. So he takes me to meet the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, talks and said, you know, he's West African, but you can trust him. And he ends up introducing me to business people across the continent. He introduced me to the Honorable, to the current President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, and he said the same thing. He's West African, and you can trust him. But also, Ezra introduced me to his best friend, Sudi Vidyarthi. And when we came to Kenya, we were looking for investors. He took us to Sudi's house and convinced Sudi and said, look, I think this lot are trustworthy. You can do something with them. So for me, Ezra is like a wonderful brother. He had a great knack for making friends and deep friendships across everywhere. He had probably the biggest Rolodex, and for those of you who don't know what a Rolodex is because you are too young, it's actually an address book. And Ezra had, probably his phone had more memory than anybody else. You start talking about something and he says, hang on a sec, I know so and so, he'll just make a call. If Ezra had been a consultant, he'd have made more money from just his networks and connections. I have to say, we have lost one of Africa's most visionary men. He was a man who advocated for open borders. He was a man who advocated for business. He was a man who believed in private enterprise at a time when private enterprise and entrepreneurship was not a cool thing. I'll miss him for a long time because I'll miss my advisor, my friend, my cheerleader. Thank you.